Avoid the nightmare of merging massive features in GitHub, and a few other benefits with the power of feature flags in the next episode of On.net. Hello, and welcome to another episode of On.net. .NET developers are probably familiar with the challenge of working on large projects and adding new features. These features might span multiple releases. You may want to show a feature, roll back a feature. There's a lot of challenges around managing that, especially if you're working with feature branches and dealing with merges. My name is Jeremy Lickness. I'm your host for On.net, and today we're continuing our series, DevOps for .NET Developers. I have with me DevOps rockstar Abel Wang to talk about feature flags. Abel, welcome.
Thank you so much, Jeremy. So happy to be here.
Awesome. Tell us a little bit about what you do, and then let's jump right into it.
So my name is Abel. I'm a principal cloud advocate and also the DevOps lead here at Microsoft. And I really, first and foremost, I'm a coder. I'm a .NET coder. It's what I do.
You're a coder with a lot of guitars behind you. So tell me about feature flags, because this is something that I think impacts a lot of people. I've worked on those projects that have long-running features, and the question is, do we just kind of tear off a branch over here, work in isolation, suddenly slam it back into the mainstream, etc.? But I understand feature flags are something that can help with that.
Yes, feature flags is one of my most favorite techniques, actually. At its most basic, a feature flag is an if statement. So if your flag is on, do this chunk of code. Else, do this other chunk of code. So what you end up doing is anytime you have a new feature or you do a bug fix or something like that, you wrap that around your features flag. So you can say, if my new feature is on, do this stuff over here. And if it's off, then go ahead and do my old code. All right? So it's really simple to implement. The benefits of having feature flags is massive. So one of the things you can use it for, like you were alluding to, is a lot of times we write a feature that can span multiple sprints, right? And we need to be able to isolate that code in some fashion. So what people usually do is have a long living branch that has that code in there. I hate long living branches, because ultimately at some point in time you're going to have to merge that long living branch back into someplace, right? Back into master, back into whatever. And whenever you do that, what happens?
Merge nightmare.
That is right. Oh my God, it's such a pain, right? We've all gone through that. So it's horrible. So the closer I can dev off of my master branch doing trunk-based development, the happier I am. Using feature flags, it allows me to do that. I have a new feature, I wrap it in a flag, I check it back into master, and now I can literally dev off of master, and it won't affect what other people will see, right? So that becomes super, super powerful. The other benefit of feature flags is it divorces your deployments from when you actually enable that feature for your end users to see, right? So that starts giving you all sorts of flexibility that you didn't have before. So now I can enable a feature at any point in time, and that's completely separate from when I actually deploy my code. And the last thing that I love about feature flags is, man, if I have feature flags in place, it totally protects me with rollback abilities, right? So oftentimes we deploy a particular feature and someone tells me, oh, that's great, we thought, except there's a bug, can you roll it back out? How do you roll it back out? With feature flags, that becomes incredibly simple. You just turn the flag off and bam, just like that, magically your code is rolled back, right? So there's a lot of benefits to feature flags.
Okay, so I'm sold on feature flags. They sound awesome. As a .NET developer who's interested in implementing this and using it in a project, how do I get started?
Okay, so getting started is super simple, right? Everyone always tells me, or not everyone, but a lot of people always tell me when I start telling them about feature flags, they say, that sounds amazing, that sounds great, but my app isn't designed for that, it's not architected, we're just not ready. And sure. I tell them, is your app ready for an if statement? Because if you can write an if statement in your app, you can start doing feature flags. And if you're a .NET dev, it becomes really, really simple. So you can write your own feature flag library, but I don't recommend it because it's kind of a pain, and those edge cases become really difficult to code for. There are libraries in place already that does feature flagging. And in fact, if you're a .NET dev, it's built into .NET where you can just start using feature flags. So you want to see how that works?
I would love to see how that works.
All right. So the very first thing we need to do is figure out where do we want to store our feature flags, right? So you can store your feature flags in the code itself. You can store your feature flags in like a configuration file or things like that. So for me, I want to store my feature flags in a centralized location that I can flip on and off where I don't have to recompile my code, right? So there is a really cool feature inside of Azure called Azure App Configuration, which is a centralized location where you can store your feature flags. So the first thing I'm going to do is show you how you can create your app configuration in Azure.
Awesome. Let's check it out.
Okay, so here we are in the Azure portal. To create an Azure app configuration, let's go ahead and create a new resource. And the resource that we want to create is an Azure app configuration. So we'll go ahead and search for Azure app configuration and hit enter. And when this finally comes back, we'll go ahead and choose it. Now, once we choose it, it's going to kind of walk us through a tiny little wizard where we can configure whatever it is that we want. So here it is. We'll go ahead and choose Azure App Configuration. And it's going to ask us, do you want to create it? Which of course we do. So let's click Create. And now it's going to ask us, what do you want to name it? What resource group do you want to associate it to? And things like that, right? And once you fill all of this out, so we can call this a task. Let's go ahead and choose a resource group. We can select an existing one or create a brand new one. We would go ahead and click Create. Now, it takes a little bit of time to create this. So in the interest of time, I've already created one. So this is what it will look like once you've created your app configuration. So once you have your app configuration, there's a couple of things that you're going to need, right? First thing that you're going to need is your app is going to need to be able to connect to this app configuration through a connection string. So to get the connection string, let's go into my access keys. And from here, you'll be able to see all of my keys. One of them is going to be my connection string. So here's my connection string. I'll go ahead and copy that. And just in the interest of this, let's go ahead and paste that into Notepad. So let me bring up a Notepad really quickly, and I'll go ahead and paste it in here. So you can see, here is my endpoint.
Oh my gosh, I see your secret.
No, not to my demo app configuration. All right, so once we have that, the next thing that we got to do is we have to actually create our flags, right? So to do that, go ahead and click on Feature Manager. And here we are, where we can create our new feature, our new keys, and we can also create, or you can also see all of the keys that you have. So I've already created one called Beta. We'll go ahead and turn it on the off position. As you can see, you can just toggle it on and off, right? If you want to create a brand new one, that's easy enough to do. You just click on Add, and from here, you just give it a name, and you also can give it a tag and also a description as well. All right, so once we've done all that, we've created our new feature toggle. Now we need to make changes in our code, right? So let's go ahead and jump into my instance of my code, which is Visual Studio. So the first thing we're going to do is remember to access this Azure App Configuration. It's a connection string, right? So in theory, I could come in here and add that in here into my app settings, where I can say, I can add in my connection string and blast it all in here, and then of course there we go. And this is great, except great, I'm going to stick my secret in a configuration file. I don't think so, right? That's clearly not best practices. So instead of doing that, what I usually end up doing so that I can debug this locally is I go ahead and I add this into my secret manager, right? So to do that, you have to be in the same directory as your CS proj, and once you have that, you can go ahead and enter in the .NET, use user secret, set connection string, and then you pop in that string that I had before, right? And if we click Enter, is going to set that secret into my secret manager. So now I can run everything locally, and it'll go ahead and connect up to my app configuration. If I deploy this app into Azure, this is just a connection string, right? So then I'm just going to add this connection string to my app settings. So that's how you usually do that.
So you just give it the same name, but set it up in the app settings in the cloud.
Yep, that's it. So simple enough to do, right? There's some code changes that we have to do as well. So let me walk you through the different types of code changes that you have to do. Here is my Visual Studio. So the first thing that we're going to do is inside of your program.cs, we're going to have to add a new configuration, and we're going to add the Azure App Configuration. Oh, but before you do that, of course, I forgot, you have to add the correct NuGet packages, right? So there are two NuGet packages that we want to add. The first one is going to be the Microsoft.Azure.AppConfiguration.ASP.NET Core. So we add this because this is a .NET Core application. And we also want to add the NuGet package Microsoft.FeatureManagement.ASP.NET Core as well. So you add those two, and the next thing you do is you go into your program.cs file, and we're going to add a new configuration, right? So we're going to add a new configuration. We're going to say it's going to be an Azure App Configuration, and it's going to get the values from the connection strings and the connection string that is called app config, which is what we just set, right? And then we're going to say, let's go ahead and use the feature flags. So we set that up in our program.cs. There's a couple more setups, things that we need to do. The next thing that we're going to do is in the startup.cs, in the configure services, we're going to add the feature management feature, right? So this does two things. It sets up dependency injection for us. It also configures and sets up the feature management system inside of our .NET Core application. And now there is one last thing that we got to do, which is inside of our configure, we're going to add in middleware use Azure App Configuration. And what this will do is instead of just reading the file or reading the configuration settings, which is our toggles, and just storing it in cache, it's going to refresh that every 30 seconds, right? So then it's going to act dynamic. Right. So that's the setup that you have to do within your .NET Core code or ASP.NET code. Then to use them, it becomes pretty simple as well, right? So there's a couple more coding things that we're going to do when we actually use our flags. The first thing that I did is I created an enum, and this enum is going to have all the values or all the keys for my toggles, right? So I only have one toggle right now called beta. So there we go. And then in my code, I literally get to do this, right? So first thing we're going to do is we're going to use dependency injection to pop in the feature manager. So this is a pretty standard pattern, right, in our constructor. And then when we want to use that feature flag, I wrap it in my if statement. So if my feature flag manager is enabled async, and I pass in the key, which is beta, if it is true, go ahead and run this code. Otherwise, go ahead and run this chunk of code here. Pretty simple. It's an if statement.
Is enabled async? Should that be awaited?
I don't await it. You can, just depends on how you want to handle it, which is why I use result.
Oh, that's right. Never mind. I totally missed the result. Got it.
So basically, I'm treating this as like a synchronous call instead of an async call.
Sure.
Yeah.
But what this is doing is it's giving me the result, but the infrastructure behind the scenes is ensuring that this is as up to date as possible.
Yeah, and by up to date, remember it's polling every 30 seconds, right? So
Got it.
There's like a 30-second lag. So then it hits my views, right? And you notice I'm doing different things with my view. And you have the ability now to add these flags inside of your view as well. Right, so we've really tried to make this as simple as possible. Oh, one other thing that I wanted to show is that you can even use the power of annotation as well. So if for whatever reason you want to add a particular annotation, let's say you can add this annotation at the class level. So now if the feature flag is turned on, then this entire class is enabled. And if the feature flag is turned off, then this class doesn't even exist, right? So that's pretty cool. You can do it at the class level, or you can even add the annotation at a particular method level as well. So for instance, we can add this FeatureGate annotation at the method level. So now again, this method exists if the feature flag is on, and then it doesn't exist if it's not on. Right? So there's a lot of things that we do to kind of try to simplify things for you. Now we're going to hit our view, and I'm going to want to change my view a little bit as well. So to do that, the first thing that we're going to do is we have to import the right packages into our view. So we go into our view imports, and we add the tag helper, Microsoft.featuremanagement.asp.NET Core. Once we do that, now we can start using this tag. And I freaking love this because it's so simple. Feature, you pass in the name. If it's on, then have this chunk of HTML. Otherwise, if it's off, negate is equal to true, then you do this chunk of code.
Nice.
And then in my actual view itself, so that's my layout file, and that in my actual view itself, I have the same thing. If the flag is on, spit this out. If it's off, then spit this chunk of code out. So you want to see it running?
I would love to.
Because like, what could possibly go wrong, right? So let me
That's
go ahead.
Right.
We'll hit F5, and we'll watch my machine. And my machine's a little bit slow, so you have to be patient. Well, then here is our application. Now, this is showing with the feature flag off, and let me bring that other web page up, right, with our flags, because then we can start toggling our flags in real time, and you'll see what that looks like. So here is my toggle. You'll notice my toggle for the beta is off. So if I go ahead and hit the privacy, it's going to show me the privacy screen, which is with the toggle off. And that's what it looks like. Not very exciting. So we'll go ahead and flip the toggle. So we'll come in here. Let's turn the toggle on. And remember, it takes about 30 seconds, right? Well, it depends. It's polling every 30 seconds to see if the toggle has changed or not. So we might have to refresh this a couple times. Let's go ahead and refresh this. And there we go. Notice beta is turned on, and instead of saying privacy, we change this now to be named beta privacy. So if I go ahead and click on that, you'll see instead of going to the old view, it hits that little chunk of beta code that I threw into my view as well. So there you go. That's feature flags. That is literally how easy it is to add your feature flags into your .NET application. Now, I'm sorry, go ahead.
Oh, I was going to say I had two questions for you, but you're about to jump into something, so I'll wait till you're done.
All right. So the next thing that I wanted to say is this is great, right? But we can also automate this because clearly most of the time you're not going to want someone to come in here and toggle this on and off manually through the Azure portal, right? So what you can also do is you can take that to do this command. It's a simple command that I can use from the Azure CLI, which means I can start embedding this into my pipeline as well. So I can go ahead and deploy and then have automation in my pipeline that turns these flags on or off. Or I can do it manually like this as well. So like I said, if you can do an if statement in your application, then you can easily add feature flags into your apps as well.
So Abel, I have two questions as a developer as I'm watching this. The first question I have is I want to work on a feature locally, so I want to be able to debug it, so I need to turn that feature on. I obviously don't want to turn it on for everyone. So how do we manage features across environments? Is that a different instance of that app configuration service, or is there some other way to handle that?
Yeah, what I would do, if you're using the .NET library, what I would do is I would have a different app configuration for every environment. So that way, you would just point to the right connection strings and you don't affect what's happening in production, right? So that works really well. If you want to use, there are other third-party libraries as well that are even more feature-rich than what's just built into .NET. One of the third-party feature flag systems that I love is LaunchDarkly. They have the ability where you can just turn on the feature flag for specific people. You can even have feature flags turned on for like a percentage of your traffic, right? They can get super, super fancy as well. So there's a couple of ways to approach it.
And then the other question I have is, does this impact performance at all? Should I be concerned with this impacting my application because it's polling for feature flags, et cetera? I'm assuming it's low overhead, but I have to ask.
It's extremely low overhead, right? The way that we have it set up right now is it's pinging once every 30 seconds. So that doesn't take up a whole lot of processing power to ping every 30 seconds. You can tweak that, right? So if you think that's like still too much, you can say, I only want to check once every hour, once every whatever, right? You can really fine tune that to whatever you need. The other thing is, in terms of overhead, it is an if statement. So you have that extra if processing, but then again, not a big deal, right? Where the overhead really comes into play is managing these flags once you have them, right? Creating the flags is not a big deal. It's super easy to do. But maintaining your flags starts turning into a pain because ultimately it's an if statement. So you're adding complexity to your code. So the more flags you have, the more complexity you're adding to your code. If you have nested flags, then you start adding the complexity. It just starts compounding, right? So the rule of thumb is, as soon as you are done with the flag, get rid of it. Clean it up. Clean it up from your code. Clean it up from your app configuration manager as well, right? Clean it up as soon as you possibly can. Don't leave it lying around, because leaving flags lying around, whether it's in your code or in the app configuration manager, that's debt. And as we know, debt is sneaky. It sneaks up on you until one day you're just like, oh my goodness, what's going on? My code is just, there's so many if statements everywhere, I'm going crazy, right? So clean up your flags.
So we've heard of feature creep, but we want to avoid feature flag creep as well, right? And hopefully you don't have to designate someone on the team as the feature flag custodian. Then you know you have too many feature flags in play.
Right. It's just important. When you create a flag, clean them up. So what I usually tell people is, but there is a tax associated with creating your feature flags. However, done correctly, personally, I feel like the price that we pay for having flags, it is dwarfed by comparison to the benefits that you gain for having flags. You're able to move so much faster. In fact, I'll totally go out on a limb here, on a DevOps limb here. To truly move at DevOps speed, you need to have feature flags.
And these are something, it's not just a notion or an idea that we just threw the library in. We use these flags ourselves at Microsoft, correct?
Oh, absolutely. We use it all the time. With the Azure DevOps Services team, the team that I'm most closely associated with, every single new feature they write is wrapped up in a flag. Every new bug fix that they write is wrapped up in a flag. There are some flags that are permanent flags, but most of the flags are ephemeral, right? They run for a while. As soon as we realize, you know what, this is working, it's out in production, we're never going to roll that back, they immediately go back and clean all that code up as well.
Nice. Well, that sounds terrific. So today, you really introduced us to two key things that .NET developers can tap into: a library that's part of .NET that you can use to manage feature flags, and a service that's part of Azure that can serve as a repository for managing those flags. So as .NET developers, go check this out. Look at integrating it in your system. As Abel said, if you're doing DevOps without feature flags, you might not be doing it right.